Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. As colonial election campaign intensify in La République du Cameroon, Ambazonians have once again been reminded of the deep misconceptions surrounding the ongoing struggle. One of the presidential candidates, in what might have been said with good intention, suggested that Southern Cameroons only seek sovereignty because they do not feel at home in La République du Cameroon, promising that his vision of one Cameroon would give Ambazonians the same fair treatment as French Cameroonians, one void of marginalization. While such remarks may not necessarily stem from ill intent, they reveal a glaring misunderstanding of the very foundation of the Ambazonian revolution. It is not only a struggle for inclusion, nor a quest to feel at home under a colonial regime. It is the reclamation of sovereignty that was stolen from the peoples of Southern Cameroon. Sovereignty rooted in their distinct history, their separate institutions, and their legitimate right under international law. Now, for over 6 decades, Ambazonians have endured marginalization, militarization, and systemic erasure at the hands of Yaounde's government. From the betrayal of 1961, when the United Nations resolution failed to guarantee British Southern Cameroon's independence, to the forceful assimilation after 1972 and the outright declaration in 1984 that erased the United Republic, Amazonia has been treated not as an equal partner, but as a conquered territory. The effort to portray this revolution as simply a matter of feeling at home misses the essence of why Ambazonians rise daily against colonial oppression. Ambazonians are not asking for comfort within a union. They are standing firm on their right to self-determination and the restoration of the sovereignty that was unlawfully denied. Well, today's news would be seen not just in the light of campaign promises or political rhetoric from French Cameroon, but as another opportunity to remind the world why Ambazonians continue the struggle, because freedom, dignity, and sovereignty are not negotiable privileges. They are inherent rights. And with that, we get the prime headlines. And these are the prime headlines on Undaunted tonight. We see in Bamenda that bike riders say no to prolonged lockdown. Abdul Karim writes as Philemon Yang aids Biya's 2025 campaign in Bamenda. And Jacques' Bouhga campaign, the misconception of comfort versus the reality of sovereignty in another presidential candidate's campaign strategy. But then 64 Ambazonians around Malende were arbitrarily arrested by French Cameroon military. And on the African scene, Mali launches airstrikes in Kais region amid Al-Qaeda-linked blockade threatening fuel and industry. And on the global scene, Nepal Prime Minister resigns as deadly protests over social media ban escalate. With that, we head on to the full briefings of Undaunted tonight. Over the years, The Ambazonian fight for sovereignty has not only faced brutal repression from the colonial regime, but has also been undermined by detractor factions from within. These factions, often acting without any legitimate mandate, have exploited the struggle by imposing unnecessary and extended lockdowns on the population. Far from advancing the cause of liberation, such arbitrary calls issued with no tangible or worthy reason have only deepened the suffering of innocent civilian populations in Ambazonia. Families are cut off from livelihoods, children are barred from attending schools, and communities are left to languish in fear. This deliberate abuse of the people's sacrifice creates confusion, fractures unity, and risks eroding the legitimacy of the genuine leadership of Ambazonia under President Samuel Sako. Now, reports have it that commercial bike riders in Bamenda took to the streets early on Tuesday, September 9th, today, calling for an end to the imposed lockdowns on the population. The riders, who played a vital role in the city's transportation system, are demanding that those responsible should lift the ban and allow children to return to school and fathers and mothers to return to their various work. There has been an anonymous call for a 1-month lockdown starting from September 9th, 2025. According to the call, circulation is only permitted on Saturdays and Sundays. This call, which is not sanctioned by the Ambazonian government, led by Dr. Samuel Sako, is not welcomed by bike riders in Bamenda. The protest comes as the new school year kicks off nationwide. But in the Savannah and Midland zone of the Federal Republic of Ambazonia, the bike riders believe that the lockdowns are crippling the local economy and disrupting daily life, making it difficult for them to earn a living. The bike riders' protest highlights the growing economic hardship faced by residents in Bamenda. Many businesses have shut down or relocated due to the frequent lockdowns, resulting in significant financial losses. We have with us in the studios to help us go along each and every report to Barrister Mbeseha. Good evening, sir, and welcome.
Thank you for having me once more.
Always a pleasure. So we're starting with this report, the protest in Bamenda. And from the reports we're getting, this is not the government led by Dr. Samuel Sako led lockdown. It is from some anonymous source spreading the information online of this lockdown set for 1 month, according to the information. Now, given that the detractor factions continue to impose such unlawful and harmful measures in the name of the same struggle, measures that neither serve the sovereignty, fight, nor protect the civilian population, we can't help but ask the question, how can the law and governance structures of Ambazonia address these abuses to both safeguard the people and uphold the credibility of its legitimate leadership? Because whether we agree or not, this goes a long way to neutralize the efforts of the genuine liberation movement. So, Barrister Mbeseha, this is where the question gets to you.
Well, I think the question calls into issue many things that people have not yet addressed. Lockdown, what is a lockdown in the first place? What do you really mean in simple language? What's a lockdown? A lockdown is an act brought by yourself, doing pain to yourself, with the intent of highlighting something bigger. It's like something you call a hunger strike. You go to prison, or for anything's sake, you refused to eat. You're refusing to eat, maybe to highlight the prison conditions under which you are, but you refuse food. That is civil disobedience. That is lockdown. And so the lockdowns for 1 day, for 1 week, for 1 year are not harmless. They do harm to people. They hurt you, the person doing it. But they are intended to bring to light something bigger than your personal suffering. In this instant case, to highlight the problem of Amazonia to the forces that be, to the authorities that be, including Cameroon government and the international community at large. And so that is the goal of lockdown. Should they bring us so much harm? Certainly not. We should be able to control that. But the issue now, which is very interesting and important to address, is how you find these guys in your headline there. Bamenda bike riders say no to prolonged lockdown. They can say no to prolonged lockdown or to civil disobedience. But you see them there in the street. They are demonstrating against who and before who. They have missed the whole point of demonstrations. Demonstrations are intended to highlight the situation to an authority that can address it. For example, if you have no lights, you go there, you want sonar to put you lights. If you have no roads, you demonstrate, you want the government to give you roads. Because the government is able to give roads, it is their responsibility. Because the sonar or new or whatever thing which is supposed to give you electricity, you demonstrate for that service. So these demonstrations in Bamenda town, the bike riders, they are demonstrating who are they showing there? They are trying to show the colonial administrators. Are the colonial administrators responsible for the lockdowns? No. The colonial administrators, from governor to prefect and mayors, they are also challenging the ghost towns and the lockdown. They have been trying for 9 years to stop them. They cannot stop them. So, bike demonstrators before the duo, before the governor or whoever the minister in Yaoundé or the president in Yaoundé, which is President Biya, are not going to change anything. They don't have the power. They don't have any influence over lockdown. They have tried to stop lockdown by themselves, by force, by killing people, by force, by adding double locks to the stores, by force, by catching people and locking them, by intrigues, by bribing people with money, and they have not succeeded. So how do you go demonstrating before a toothless somebody who himself has tried to stop the lockdowns and failed to stop it? They are doing the wrong thing. They are addressing their problem to the wrong people. They should address it to us, the Ambazonian government. If they are hurting too much, it is us in different ramifications who can listen their plight, who can try to soften what is going on. Because we call for lockdowns. Maybe prolonged, maybe not prolonged. But whatever. This is who are calling lockdown prolonged for 1 week, for 2 weeks. Pretend, while these popular they are doing it on behalf of Ambazonia. Also, these things, the pain that they go through should be addressed within those circles. Not in the streets of Bamenda or in the streets of Bouhga by demonstration, because the duo again have said the authorities they are demonstrating before them are toothless. They themselves have tried to kill the lockdowns and failed in every means that they have used. And so it's a wrong thing to do what they are doing. We agree, I personally agree, that if they are too long, they will hurt people more than what we expected. But bottom line, as I've said, the whole idea of lockdown is self-inflicted. When you feel the pain, you sit in your house, you don't go to your farm, you don't go to anything. In the rational government, they should keep quiet. Because what does it hurt you? If I don't open my store, what's the problem? What's the problem of the governor there? If I don't open my store, I still pay my patam. What's the problem of the mayor? You still pay a business license. Why are they so worried about that? And so we know that they are intended to, they hurt us, but they bring to light a bigger problem, which is very, very effective. Yaoundé is fighting against it to try to show normalcy, which they have failed. They have failed to show that the situation in Ambazonia has returned to normal. Therefore, the Ambazonian problem is still unsolved. It's still waiting for a solution. That's important for the lockdowns. That's important for the ghost days, whatever thing we call them. But again, we should be able to address the pain. If the pain is too much, we should be able to address it within the Ambazonian struggle itself, not to be addressed by the enemy that the lockdowns are intended to challenge. So that's the bottom line. I think the bounded by riders they might be they don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know what they're doing. I think within our own circles, we have structures that they can address their grievances to. Well, at least to have a government that they can say, look, this thing you have said for 2 weeks or for 1 month is too long. And within that circle, we can reduce it. We can say, look, okay, it was a mistake. Let us bring it to 1 week. Let us bring it to a few days. We'll shorten it. because we have the ability to. Those guys who are enforcing it at least take some instructions from us. And so addressing it to the governor in Abakwa Street, to the governor in Bamenda, in Kumba, wherever, he just misguided action towards a rightful cause. Over to you.
All right, Barrister Mbeseha. Well, we're taking a look at the larger scope on Amazonia, and we see that a storm of criticism has erupted following revelations that Philemon Yang, the former Prime Minister of French Cameroon and current UN diplomat, has been appointed to head President Paul Biya's re-election campaign in Bamenda. The decision, formalized in early September 2025, has been described by Ambazonian activists as a betrayal of his people and a direct affront to the ongoing fight for self-determination in southern Cameroon. Now, the sharpest rebuke came in an open letter dated 7 September 2025, penned by activist Abdul Karim, which denounces Yang's choice as both hypocritical and morally indefensible. In the letter, Ali reminds Yang of earlier years when he urged young southern Cameroonians to honor their anthem and uphold the motto of God, knowledge, service. Today, Ali argues Yang's alignment with President Biya's regime stands in stark contradiction to those ideals. President Biya, who had clung to power for more than 4 decades and is now seeking an 8th mandate at the age of 92, has been widely accused of presiding over systematic atrocities. Reports detailed mass killing, arbitrary arrest, village burnings, and the displacement of more than 1 million Ambazonians since the conflict reignited in 2016. Activists note that the war Biya declared in 2017 has claimed at least 25,000 to 50,000 lives, while thousands more languish in jails across French Cameroon. Abdul Karim Ali's letter situates Yang's decision within this grim context, citing examples of brutality that have seared collective memory: the killing of Akum Julius and Clement, the beheading of community elder Sam Sawyer, and the horrific case of a baby burned alive in Kwakwa. For Ali and many others, Yang's role in legitimizing Biya's continued rule represents an attempt to whitewash these crimes. The activist also draws attention to Yang's international record, particularly his vocal calls for peace in conflicts such as Gaza and Ukraine, while remaining silent on the daily sufferings in his own homeland. Quoting scripture, Ali challenges Yang's selective morality, saying, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye and ignore the plank in your own?" Beyond the moral critique, the letter raises deeper questions about Yang's legacy. Even if Biya had developed Cameroon's infrastructure, even if there was no war under Paul Biya, Abdul Karim Ali argues 43 years in power can never constitute democracy. Instead, Yang's compliance is painted as an act of fear, convenience, and political opportunism. Ali concludes with biting words: "If you have accepted this task of leading the election campaign in Bamenda for a dictator and fascist, ethno-supremacist, knowing fully well that over 8 million Ambazonian southern Cameroons are in agony, then I am sorry to say that you are a sociopath." He ended that letter. Well, the letter has since circulated widely online, intensifying a sense of betrayal amongst Ambazonians who view Yang as siding with the very system that has oppressed southern Cameroons for many years. And for a lot of people, this development underscores a painful truth that some elites of southern Cameroon's origin are willing to aid the colonial regime even at the cost of their people's blood and tears. And as Biya's controversial bid for another term sparks renewed division, Yang's choice has become a litmus test of loyalty. Will Amazonian sons and daughters stand with the people's struggle or with the decayed machinery of a dictator? Well, we're seeing the answer with this recent report. Barrister Mbeseha,
Yes.
I'd like you to address this particular topic. It came quite as a surprise that Philemon Yang is now, with the position he holds at the UN, is actually going to aid and abet Paul Biya's campaign in Bamenda. It's one thing for him to stay silent, but then another thing for him to actively get involved in ensuring that the Paul Biya, who has been president for 42 years and counting, continues that cycle. What are your thoughts on this, Barrister Mbeseha?
Well, those who expected Philemon Yang to stay silent, people who don't know who Philemon Yang is, don't expect Philemon Yang to stay silent because he is, take away the word traitor, he's one of the greatest beneficiaries of this occupation, of this assimilation since 1961. He's going through the rank and file of the administration. He has benefited. I'm not sure there's no other person in Ambazonia who has benefited like Philemon Yang. And as a reminder, Philemon Yang comes from Kumbo. He's supposed to be the son of the warriors. When Philemon Yang graduated from the University of Yaoundé in the late 70s, he went to Enam to become a magistrate. I was posted to Bouhga to do just the start. He had not even been integrated into the magistracy. He was called from his small office in Bouhga to come to Yaoundé and become the minister or vice minister of mines and power. He was in the late 70s. At the time, under Ahijo. I remember me myself in 1979 going to Philemon Yang's office in Yaoundé as Minister of Mines and Energy, whatever they call it at the time, to look for a job when I was a student in Yaoundé. So he has been there forever. And Philemon Yang, again, fast forward, I say he has benefited from this regime more than any other person has. If there's an Anglophone, they call it Anglophone problem, he ought to know. He's a lawyer. So he is an unrepentant traitor to the cause. He had benefited, as said, from the time of Ahijo in the 1970s when he was minister. And when he moved from there, fast forward, we can remember that 2016, when this crisis started, it was Philemon Yang, the prime minister. He was in the office in Yaoundé as a prime minister. Gogomo, who was supposed to be negotiating these things between the teachers, the lawyers, was from his office. That was Philemon Yang's staff. And when the government decided to arrest Agwambala, Fontaine, and so on and so forth, Philemon Yang was in office as a prime minister. It was his dears that Agwambala and the rest said they wanted to address the form of state. And because they wanted to address the form of state, they were arrested. That was under Philemon Yang. Since then, he left office and rested for a while. But prior to that, after he becoming minister, let me go back to it again. He became an ambassador. He became an ambassador in Canada. Before that, he was the assistant secretary general in the presidency. So he has occupied all these offices in the administration. It's not because he doesn't know. Then he gets to the United Nations, appointed by Paul Biya, and does over he does for 1 year. Even saw him going to meet the Pope in Rome, Pope Leo XIV recently, as an envoy of Paul Biya. So it's Philemon Yang, he knows everything that he can talk about. So if you expect anything to come from Philemon Yang, you are deceiving yourselves. Because Philemon Yang would have said, if he was the one in charge of the negotiations in 2016, why they arrested these guys, he would have said, no, this is enough. He would have put down his feet and said, nonsense will end. He didn't do it. He sided with the administration. If Philemon Yang has had any money, which I'm sure he has, if he's rich, he's rich. He has been rich from the administration. He's rich from Paul Biya combined with Ahijo. And so he's there. We'll call him Ambazonian honor by name. Call him Ambazonian honor by name. And so if he's appointed to head President Paul Biya's campaign in the Northwest, call it like that, we know that we're not going for elections. And I can guarantee you this. You're not going to see Philemon Yang somewhere in Bengui or somewhere in Dub campaigning for Paul Biya. Lie, because nobody will even come out to listen to them there when they're campaigning for Paul Biya during these elections. Where he's having an office. It's a money-making office. They have just created another forum for him. They get money for himself. Because election campaigns in Cameroon, especially the presidential elections, go with a lot of money. They are giving chunks of money. No accountability is demanded from you. You do what you like. The rest you keep it. So whatever amount he was giving, he's going to be given to be the campaign manager for the Northwest. This is his personal money. He can give you Biya if he wants to. He can give you bread and sardine if he wants to. He's not going to give back the money to Yaoundé. And so this man is known as, he's not even a double dealer because he's not pretending to have the funds. He's a straightforward traitor. He is a traitor to the cause. Abdul Karim is expecting much from him. Nothing will come from Philemon Yang. Don't expect anything to come from him. Because what is going on now, and what has always gone on from 1960, we will not be where we are until Ahijo, and later on Paul Biya, was able to find Ambazonians who could cooperate with him, who could sell his criminal doctrine of one and indivisible. One of those people who is still living right now is Philemon Yang. There's nothing he has not benefited from the regime. Financially, international recognition, and everything you can imagine about it. He served as ambassador in Canada for so many years. Can you say he doesn't know the difference between Quebec and Canada? He knows that. And so he's a lawyer. He went to school. He went to law. He studied law in Yaoundé. And so don't expect much from Philemon Yang. He's a traitor. If you wanted to be useful, I've insisted, it would have been useful in 2016 when Tassan, when Aguambala, when Fontaine they were asking for a revisit to the constitution. It is his government that obstructed the idea because these people in the consortium, they thought that they should unite with the ones on the Southwest and present one delegation. Say, no, we'll talk to the people differently. We'll talk to you in the Northwest differently. That was Philemon Yang acting through his agent, Bouhga. To do what? Because he knew that if you address the root causes of the problem, if you address the constitution which we were asking for, that would go to the root causes of the Ambazonian problem. But he blocked it. He blocked it. I expect nothing from him, so I should not even expect to hold him accountable. The only thing I can do if I have anything to say about him is to call him a traitor. Remember where you are, we know who you are, we don't expect any change from you. Philemon Yang is not a small boy. At least he's in his 70s or 80s. He's an old man by every standard. He's an educated man by every standard. He's a diplomat by every standard. Having served as ambassador, having served at United Nations. He's a politician by every standard. Having served as a prime minister, having served as minister. In different categories. This is seizing man in every aspect of life. But if he refuses to see what we stand for, what else can we do? Should we continue to beg him? No. We're trying to make a stone to turn a stone into water. It's not possible. Let us forget about him. Let us focus on something else. Over to you.
Well said, Barrister Mbeseha. But then, even still on the electoral circus going on in La Republique, amidst the ongoing colonial electoral circus in La Republique, one particular moment has actually stood out away from Philemon Yang. Another one stands out. While in an interview with Mimi Mefo Info, presidential candidate Dr. Jacques Bouhga addressed the question of Southern Cameroons. He claimed that in his vision of one Cameroon, he would ensure Southern Cameroonians feel at home, since according to him, that is the sole reason Ambazonians are seeking their sovereignty. But let's take a quick listen to snippets of what this interview was exactly like.
About English-speaking Cameroonians, because you were saying that you wanted them to feel that they are Cameroonians. Do you have the impression that they feel less of, they feel like they are not Cameroonians at all?
Yes, of course. Of course. I think that's why we have this problem in the Nozo region, and that's why some of them want to secede. That's exactly the situation. They feel marginalized. They feel despised. They feel like the rest of the country doesn't treat them as Cameroonians. This is a fact. We can't deny it. Okay, we could have done better. For example, the way that crisis in the Nozo region was handled was shameful and appalling. When someone is complaining, when someone has a legitimate grievance, when a Cameroonian community has a legitimate grievance, the minimum is to basically call them, sit down and find out solutions together. For example, my understanding was that back in 2016, the jurists were complaining about the way they were treated, the language, the treatment of the English language in courts, in the judicial system in the Nozo region. I mean, this was a legitimate grievance. I think the minimum would have been to sit down with them, look for solutions, including maybe bringing in interpreters and maybe changing the training of our jurists so that we make sure that those we send to the Anglophone regions can connect with the people. How can you judge a case if you don't understand the language of those who are speaking, if you don't understand their mindset, if you don't understand their approaches to judicial issues, like the common law, bottom up? This is, to me, was the product of two things in my view: ignorance, total ignorance, and disdain for your own people.
Someone asked that where were you when soldiers were killing civilians in the northwest and in the southwest regions of Cameroon?
No, well, I had what we call the duty of confidentiality, because when you are an international civil servant, no matter what you think, you can't speak.
The duty of confidentiality means you couldn't talk then at the time.
No, you can't talk outside. No, you can't talk outside. You keep it to yourself. It's like the police officers, the soldiers, and the gendarmes. They can't talk. You keep it to yourself. You can't talk even on social media. It will be a professional mistake, and you can be fired for that. Had they respected you, had they built roads for you, schools, you wouldn't have been in this situation. Okay? And their response was what? Brutality. In fact, the money they're spending right now, killing people, they could have used it to develop the region.
Barrister Mbeseha. Well, his exact words were telling. I want them to feel like they are Cameroonians. Now, that statement alone exposes the truth that Southern Cameroons and French Cameroon are not treated the same. The decades-long marginalization of Ambazonians is so blatant that even candidates of the colonial system don't even think of denying it. It is remarkable that this presidential aspirant, Dr. Bouhga, openly acknowledged another reality, that the colonial government has poured enormous resources into militarization and bloodshed instead of addressing the root causes of Amazonian grievances. Now, this is an indirect confirmation that rather than governance or dialogue, Yaounde's priority has been the violent suppression of a people's legitimate quest for self-determination. Barrister Mbeseha, well, I wouldn't say he said any of that with any ill intent. I could even say he might be saying that with good intention, possibly all part of the election campaign. And from all he said, I choose to think there is still a huge misconception about the purpose of this ongoing revolution. There is a lot to unpack, but then I think this is a good point for you to clarify the origin of the reclamation of Ambazonian sovereignty and make it clear why the struggle for sovereignty exists.
Thank you for having me. Again, I've said many times before, we all agree as Ambazonians that we're not part of the elections. But it's important that we follow what they are saying. Because until we know what they are saying, do we know what to expect from them? He is one of the choosing people to become president in October, if he has the luck. And so that is his own vision. And from his vision, he realized, I'm sorry to say, that interview was a little bit longer. I follow it. He realized that he doesn't understand. He said somewhere before or after that this problem was created before some of us were born, including himself. He doesn't know it. Then somewhere again in that interview, I follow it. He said, look, a woman said that he was duped. Duped from what? He has no idea. Then he proceeds. The Mimi before asked him, but these people are now saying that they want to go away. He could not speak because he was a member of the International Monetary Fund, International Business, Civil Servant. He could not work. Say, what do you say about these people who now think that they should go away? Because their complaint, their dissatisfaction is based on historical facts. Mimi before asked him that question. And his response is what interests me, that I brought it here. What did he say? He said, no, it is not like that. If they want to go away, then what would they do with those who are in Nigeria? Who went to Nigeria? He doesn't know that those who went to Nigeria under their own choice, under a same plebiscite organized by the United Nations. They didn't have the same independence with us. They had theirs on the 1st of June to join Nigeria. We had ours on the 1st of October. He didn't know this fact. But what is damning is, he said, again, answering to that question, he said, if you let them go away, they know this will one day stand up and say, we want to go away. What shall we do as a president? What will I do as a president if the Northeast stand up and say, we want to go away because Ambazonians have gotten their own independence? That is his own perception. He does not know that the Northeast are an ethnic group. Here in the Bamenda case, they are not a people like British Southern Cameroon. They have never been a people under any international law, who are a people under an international law, defined by the United Nations, defined by the African Union, and defined by all international conventions, who are a people. And as a people, who have the right to self-determination. What is self-determination? You decide where you want to be. You have the right to decide to remain there or to decide to leave. Once you understand this, I'm not sure why I didn't understand. Well, if you understood this, you will not say the Anglophones call it, don't have the right to go away. No, we have the right to go away. And I've mentioned it here a million times over. There is no human institution in the world which brings in people who have freely come together, who cannot freely separate. A union is not an imprisonment. It's a free will of people to unite, a free will of the union. That. My brother will hear from him because you're the president. You don't have been saying about somebody to sit in here one day, either poor Biya himself or another person, including this young man, and he's the president, to come and meet Ambazonians to address the root causes of the problem. You will not give proper solutions until you know the root causes of the problem. Does he know them? I don't think he knows. But by some kind of imagination, I think he knows. But because he's running for the president of the Republic of Cameroon, he will not dare say it publicly that he will let Anglophones go, because that would have cost him all the votes of people who are trying to assimilate us. Because the main reason for their presidency is to assimilate Anglophones. Let them remain part, whether they like it or not, for specific reasons. They have money that will have to benefit from it. They have the political intellect that they can set us free through demonstrations in the streets. They have the intellect that they can prosecute criminals, like Karim is doing there, to save their own people. So anybody running for presidency in Cameroon will never say anything different from what he has said. Some of them say it ignorantly, some of them say it tactically to remain there. But again, he's running for the presidency of Cameroon. If you didn't know these facts, you should learn it from us. If you knew them, thank you for being skillful that he wants to get votes from people who would otherwise not vote for him. If he vouches out for the independence of Southern Cameroon, or for their right to determine what they want to become. And so that's the unfortunate thing. There are two of them there, or three, I think there were three Ambazonians. I don't know where he comes from, but he speaks good English. He's supposed to be one of us. The other two understand it, I think, because I know Akere understands the problem. But none of them who even understand the problem would dare say that we can go away, because that will cost them votes over there. But man is just ignorant. I believe honestly, he's just ignorant. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Barrister Mbeseha, for that well thought out explanation. But then we're taking a look at while this is going on, while Dr. Jacques Bouhga talks about normalcy through the same inclusion and fair treatment Ambazonians have lacked for decades, and at this point, something far less than what Ambazonians seek. We see that while that is going on, calm is yet to return to Wututu village after the tragic events of Saturday, September 6, 2025, which left one colonial soldier and a civilian dead. The killing came barely a day after 8 colonial troops were wiped out by an improvised explosive device, an IED, in Malende. Also in the southern zone of Ambazonia, the back-to-back incidents bring the tally of colonial soldiers killed in the area to 9 within 24 hours, underscoring the worsening insecurity and the regime's failure to contain crisis it created. Now, in typical retaliation, colonial forces descended on nearby villages, Yoke, Owe, Maumu, and the surrounding communities, rounding up scores of young men. According to local findings, those who were arbitrarily arrested by these colonial forces of occupation were dragged to the Legion in Biya, where they are now being forced to pay huge sums of money to secure their release. Reports indicate that as many as 64 civilians were arbitrarily arrested within hours of the Malende incidents around the Malende environs. Ambazonians are left asking what difference exists between this and kidnapping for ransom when you arbitrarily arrest innocent civilians because of incident that happened around them that they are not involved with. Well, the so-called forces of law and order have once again turned debt into a marketplace. Instead of protecting civilians, they're extorting from them with ransom. Some speculated to reach 500,000 francs CFAs for each person. In other words, while some colonial soldiers die in combat, their colleagues exploit those debts to line their own pockets. Now, this is not a new event. Ambazonians have long been accustomed to this illegal patterns of La République du Cameroon's forces of occupation. Whenever soldiers fall in battle with their soldiers, there's collective punishment for innocent civilians. Those who managed to flee early escaped the dragnet, but the poor and innocent who had no refuge were made to pay the ultimate price. Humiliation, torture, arbitrary arrest, and ransom that they call release fee. For over 8 years, the people of Southern Cameroon have endured the cycle of repression. Such mass arrest and ransom-style bail demands are not practiced in French Cameroon, only in Southern Cameroon. Citizens are routinely rounded up, detained without due process, and forced to buy back their freedom. The colonial regime in Yaoundé remains silent, while its agents on the ground in Ambazonia continue to brutalize, exploit, and dehumanize the very population that they claim to be there to govern and protect. Well, the world has to ask a question: for how long will Southern Cameroonians suffer in silence while the colonial government and its forces of occupation turn tragedy into profit? Now, Barrister Mbeseha, given that these arbitrary mass arrests and ransom-style bail demands are clearly illegal and amount to collective punishment, and to add, they have been going on for far too long, what legal avenues exist within international law or human rights framework to hold the colonial regime accountable and protect civilians in Ambazonia from such abuses? With La République, is it even possible?
Well, legal avenues, you ask. The only legal avenues Ambazonians have is the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and other international law enforcement things. And in addition to that, sympathizing countries that can prosecute these crimes within their own jurisdictions. Those are the international avenues that we have. We have tried, and we are trying. These gross human rights abuses, turning on the civilian is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. And so that's the avenue we have. We should continue to enforce it until such a time that they are held accountable, and they would be held accountable. The greatest difficulty we have is seeing what is happening. They would never, what happened to them in Malende, like anywhere else, they are not arresting the civilians because they have done anything wrong. They must be very dull to think that those guys, whoever they were, ASA, whoever they were, who brought down those cars, will sit in Malende in the streets drinking palm wine when you come and catch them. They have gone away. So what is they coming to town to catch heavens? You think those guys are sitting there? No, before that, somewhere someone reported a few days before, in that very Malende, that they adopted a car and taken it to the bush. That provoked their military. They brought all the soldiers there, the gendarmes, to town. They have been told that the driver had been taken into the bushes. They didn't go into the bushes to look for the people to rescue them. They remained in the town. And they were catching drivers who were driving from Kumba to Bouhga and taking money from them and beating them and asking them to show identity cards. Who told them that the adoptees have identity cards in the first place? They don't have. So they are not doing it because they are angry. No, they are using the opportunity to extort from people, to steal, and to do whatever thing they want to do under the pretext that they are trying to avenge. Yes, you might want to avenge, but you must avenge against the rightful person, not against an imaginary enemy. Again, I've looked at what is going on. From what happened in Malende, I saw their official reporting. They reported that when they adopted those guys in Malende, when they killed those guys in Malende, I'm sorry about that, there's 7 of them. They counted officially, this is the official count, that would make 1,772 of their soldiers who had died. If you add those new ones, the 7 or 9 that came in that record, it will take it to 1,800. That's their official count, which is perhaps reduced by 50%. In terms of military, talking military-wise, what does that represent? The 1,800 or 1,700 represents at least 6 battalions of a regular army. 6 battalions that they admit they have lost 6 battalions of fighting people, of trained fighters. I don't know any civil war in Africa that the government in that place has suffered that much loss in the past 50 years. The most violent conflicts we can remember Africa were, for example, the Biafra War. The Biafrans lost people, but the Nigerian government never lost up to 6 battalions of their own soldiers. They didn't. They have battled in South Africa for many years. The South African forces lost people. They never lost up to 7 battalions of South African forces with Zimbabwe and other places. So this is a regime that is not even supposed to exist. They're losing 7 battalions of their forces against an organized enemy, an untrained enemy, guerrilla fighters. Is telling. Any reasonable government should have called off that fight. But now, because they started the fight, they are not doing it. They don't care how many of theirs die, talk less of how many of ours die. What they care is what they get out of it as profit. Extorting women from the street, getting small money from everybody, having free sex in the name of rape, and so on and so forth. I remember when this thing started, they sent a number of their troops in my own place. They went there, they stole everything that they had. They ate everybody they could find. They ate pigs, and they even ate the dogs. They caught the dogs and the cats, they were there and ate. Yes, you might be surprised. That may be a very precious, dogs are some precious means for some people, and cats. I mean, just to indicate how poor, how criminal these people are. And they are still fighting on, thinking that they will win. After losing, in their own words, at least 6 to 7 battalions of their own forces dead. And they want to fight. I hope these people who are running for president, like in the last segment, they have these figures and they think twice. Where in Africa has somebody, a regular army, lost so many battalions to a small fighting force? And you still think that is something you can ignore? No. Military strategy doesn't even allow that. 7 battalions by their own figures is too much. But they are not doing it. They are doubling down. Once they have an occasion, when the occasion arises, they go there. And they use it to extort money from people. Because first and foremost, those guys who even die, they are not even trained there. Among those guys who died in the Malende was a young boy, 18, 20 years old, who had begun over crash training for 4 months. And he was put on the war front. Of course, the consequence is there, death. It is there for Moyoka in the Mafia Road there, where Moyenge, where the 2 others, colonel, this young Bakuri boy, small boy. I'm told that he comes from somewhere in Boyere. They killed him. So, still by an explosive device, they blew them off. So where is these children's, where is their own future? Why are you fighting this thing that you cannot win? You fight wars to be decorated for the pride of fighting. You don't fight wars to be given posthumous decorations. No. People have to live to the reality. But as far as Ambazonians is concerned, I can say emphatically that we are winning. They are taking the toll. The toll is heavy on them in terms of money, in terms of human resources and other things. And so that's what it is. That's what it is. That's all I can say about that. What brighter days ahead? Over to you.
Indeed, brighter days ahead. Very well said, Barrister Mbeseha. I mean, at this juncture, would have to let you go. I want to say thank you for joining in. We enjoy you shedding light on these critical issues. Your perspective always bring insights to the newsroom. Thank you for joining in, Barrister Mbeseha.
Thank you for having.
All right, now to the rest of the news in Africa and across the globe. Just stay tuned. Welcome back on the African scene. The Malian military has launched a series of airstrikes in the gold-rich Kayes region in response to a growing threat posed by the Al-Qaeda-affiliated group Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin (JNIM). The group recently imposed a blockade aimed at halting fuel imports into the capital, Bamako, and has moved to restrict movement in key border towns including Kayes and Nairo, which lie near the frontiers of Senegal and Mauritania. The strikes mark a significant escalation in the government's effort to counter the growing influence of militant groups in the western part of the country. The blockade announced by JNIM last week is already having serious economic repercussions. Fuel trucks headed towards Bamako have reportedly been stopped by militants, disrupting the supply of gasoline and diesel in the capital and triggering fears of broader shortages. Now, the restrictions of movement are also impacting trade routes vital for imports and exports, compounding the pressures on an already fragile economy. The military's air campaign is seen as an urgent attempt to reopen these critical corridors and deter further militant advances. Now, beyond the fuel crisis, JNIM's offensive has directly targeted Mali's industrial and mining sectors. Over the past several days, the group has escalated attacks on key infrastructure, including cement factories, sugar processing plants, and gold mines. Global mining giants like Barrick Gold and B2 Gold, both of which operate major facilities in the region, have faced disruptions. Though the extent of damage remain unclear, these attacks threaten not only Mali's economic stability, but also the foreign investment vital to the country's recovery. The resurgence of militant activity underscores the deteriorating security situation in Mali, particularly since the military junta took power in a 2021 coup and later expelled French and UN forces. With growing insurgent influence in both and the central and western region, analysts warn that the current strategy may not be enough to contain the crisis, as the government leans more heavily on air power and local militias. Civilians in conflict-affected zones remain vulnerable to both jihadist violence and retaliatory attacks. But then with that, we'll head on to the news across the globe. On the global scene, Israel carried out an airstrike in Doha on Tuesday. Targets and senior Hamas figures, including negotiator Khalil al-Haya in one of the most significant escalations of the conflict beyond Gaza. The attack killed al-Haya's son and sent smoke rising over Qatar's capital, according to regional media. The Israeli government said the strikes was launched in response to Monday's deadly shooting in Jerusalem that killed 6 civilians. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated that the military operation was coordinated with security chiefs and executed to disrupt Hamas's leadership, accused of orchestrating attacks against Israel. The assault in Doha marks the first time Israel has directly struck Hamas leadership on Qatari soil, a country that has hosted the group's political offices and served as a key mediator in ceasefire negotiations. Now, the Lektifia neighborhood where the attack occurred is home to embassies, schools, and offices linked to Hamas's political wing. The strike drew swift international backlash. As always, the United Nations condemned the attack as a violation of Qatar's sovereignty, while France, Egypt, and Turkey warned it threatened regional stability. Qatar's Gulf neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Oman, denounced the assault and pledged support for Doha. The United States confirmed it was notified in advance of the strike but urged restraint, while the Vatican and other international voices expressed concern that the escalation could derail ongoing ceasefire efforts. Hamas officials said al-Haya survived, though his son was killed. Al-Haya has become one of the group's most influential figures abroad since the deaths of previous leaders Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar in Israel strikes last year. The attack underscores Israel's widening battlefield as it continues operations not only in Gaza but across the region to target Hamas leaders. Analysts warn the escalation risks drawing new actors into the conflict and complicating fragile mediation efforts aimed at securing a lasting truce and the release of hostages. While still on the global scene, we see Nepal's Prime Minister Khadga Prasad Oli resigned today, Tuesday, after days of violent protests triggered by a government ban on social media platforms, which quickly expanded into wider anger over corruption and political privilege. The demonstrations, led largely by young people, intensified after police opened fire on crowds in Kathmandu on Monday, killing 19. Although the government lifted the ban a day later, the protests continued, fueled by outrage over the deaths and deep frustration with the country's political elite. Tens of thousands of demonstrators stormed government buildings, set offices ablaze, and attacked the homes of senior officials, including the president, prime minister, and foreign minister. Videos shared online showed opposition leaders assaulted by angry crowds and army helicopters evacuated ministers from besieged offices, while the military urged protesters to end the unrest to avoid further bloodshed. But despite Oli's resignation, protesters remained on the streets demanding broader political change. The president accepted his resignation and appointed him to lead a caretaker administration until a new government is formed, though his authority remains uncertain. The unrest, dubbed the Gen Z protests, began after the government blocked Facebook, X, and YouTube, accusing the platforms of refusing to register under new regulations. But the demonstrations quickly tapped into long-standing grievances. With youth unemployment at nearly 20% and thousands leaving the country daily for jobs abroad, many accuse the ruling elites of corruption and nepotism, pointing to the wealth and privileges of politicians' children. Protesters torched the offices of major political parties and the parliament building, while thick smoke rose from government compounds. The violence underscored a widening crisis of legitimacy for Nepal's leadership, with calls mounting for systemic reforms rather than temporary concessions. And with that, we've come to the end of today's broadcast. But before we go, let's take a quick look at the recap. On tonight's Undaunted, we saw Bamenda bike riders saying no to prolonged lockdown. We also saw Abdul Karim writing as Philemon Yang aids Biya's 2025 campaign in Bamenda. Jacques Bouhga, a presidential aspirant, his campaign, but the misconception of comfort versus the reality of Ambazonian sovereignty. We also saw Sister 4 Ambazonians around Malende arbitrarily arrested by French Cameroon military. And on the African scene, Mali launched airstrikes in KS region amid Al-Qaeda-linked blockade threatening fuel and industry. And on the global scene, Nepal Prime Minister resigns as deadly protest over social media ban escalates. And that was it for tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. On behalf of the entire Undaunted crew, we say thank you for tuning in. We leave you with ABC Amba TV images. Good night and God bless you.